Welcome back to another Game Time Discussions. I'm Emery Cuzzy. I'm sitting here with Cameron Selby. And today we're going to go over the preseason week 3 impacts for fantasy, and then also the 53-man rosters. We're going to do them both together on this because we're going to be talking about these teams anyways. So all the cuts and everybody that got waived or is on the PUP list, we're going to go over and talk about. So this should be a very fun, and hopefully we can kind of find some of the deeper league teams and then the best ball guys that we've been talking about during this year. Hopefully, we'll talk about those guys, of course, and give you all the background and that stuff. So,
right. So, yeah, again, it's the final preseason game. We didn't expect many teams to have any kind of relevance in terms of starting playing time or significant time. A couple teams did, but we wanted to get as much information as possible because cuts happen 3 p.m. as of today. And PUP list has been coming out over the last week. I think the deadline has passed now, but everybody that's fantasy relevant and who we need to talk about. So let's get right into it. There were 2 games that took place on Friday, I believe. And that was the Colts and the Bengals. We'll start with that one. The Colts had a significant amount of snap time with the starters. And they had a really good first drive and then essentially just kind of fell apart from there. Anthony Richardson kind of played how we expected him to.
right.
But the worst part is it's not only against the below average defense, but is against the backups to that said defense. And, threw a pick 6, lost a fumble. So he just kind of struggled, and that's kind of why we've been avoiding him this all season. He's never really put it together. Everybody has a 4-game sample size that's really a 3-game sample size that's really only 2 games that had no injuries.
Right,
and
of course.
Everybody believes he's going to be a top 5 quarterback this year in terms of fantasy success, and we just do not see that whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, it's upside. Everybody, if you're going to make the case for him, it's all about upside. And basically, if he hits his ceiling, he's really good. We actually had a conversation a little bit about Joe Milton earlier about if we were to have thought about it, like if he hits his ceiling, he'd be really good also. But you took Anthony Richardson at the 4th overall pick. You take Joe Milton in the 7th round. You don't bat an eye if he's not good. With Anthony Richardson, it's a little bit scarier because he's considered the franchise quarterback. And you have been saying this. You said this originally, and I mean, I'm running with it because it's just a great take. But Trey Lance and him are basically the same players. I remember 2 years ago we were sitting at a bar watching the San Francisco game, and Trey Lance got injured, and that was the last time we saw him play for San Francisco as a starter. Now he's a backup 3rd string shoot in Dallas.
Mm-hmm.
That could be Anthony Richardson's career if he doesn't figure it out this year. So there's a lot of, the boom is awesome, but the bust is right as. Like the percentages should be about the same both ways, basically, in my eyes.
Yeah, I mean, and this team was a 9-8 team last year. They lost the final week of the season to miss the playoffs, and so they're a formidable team. They brought back and re-signed a lot of guys, a lot of key hogs, and didn't really bring in a ton. But the expectation was Anthony Richardson is the upgrade over Gardner Minshew. And
right.
I don't know how we can say that without even seeing anything yet. So that remains to be seen. I'm a little pessimistic about him. The biggest thing that kind of upsets me is everybody's willing to say that he is the breakout guy. Everybody's also willing to say that Kyler Murray, who has shown us, is going to be the sleeper of this year. And everyone is too afraid to put Kyler Murray over Anthony Richardson, and I just don't understand it at all.
Fair enough. And we will come out with our Fantasy 3.0 rankings, and you'll see where we put Kyler and Anthony. So go ahead and watch that video when it comes out. But the next guy you talk about, Jonathan Taylor looked really good. I know that it says 4 for 15, but he looked like, he was moving really well. So nothing to worry about there. Some of the receivers, Michael Pittman had 2 targets, 1 for 12, nothing special. The guy that scored the touchdown and has been really big this offseason, and we've been talking about, is A.D. Mitchell. He had him ranked higher as a receiver prospect than some of the guys that went above him, including the Keon Coleman's, Xavier Legette's. We aren't necessarily surprised, but it's just a crowded receiving room with a low volume offense, and its fantasy value just looks a little bit weary for sure.
Yeah, I mean, at least he's kind of in a reasonable range at this point, going in the 10th to 12th round, and even later on some redraft platforms. But what was encouraging is that he's getting a lot of snaps in 12 personnel. We thought that he and Josh Downs were going to be competing with that, and then when Josh Downs went down a couple weeks ago, affecting his availability, that's just giving AD Mitchell more reps. So who knows how fantasy relevant he can be, but it is encouraging that he's having a good camp and he's actually getting the playing time to show for it.
Right. And then on the other side, Jermaine Burton continues to just be good. And of course, we originally saw him as the seventh receiver in, but he actually started this game, making him, at least moving up the depth chart is what we feel, which is good because we did have a lot of him in best ball. 13 snaps, but 10 routes, only 2 targets, but not playing with the ones. Logan Whiteside didn't look terrible. So, I mean, it just was 5 targets. It was really good to see him, producing again, especially because we have so much of him.
Right. And Cincinnati didn't really have a ton of things to even talk about other than Jermaine Burton, of course. He's somebody that at this point we're just kind of tying together with Iosivas, who's been running all the slot snaps as the wide receiver 3. I don't know who's going to be it, late in the season, but it sounds like early on it'll be Iosivas. But pairing them together, especially if you're going with the Cincinnati stack, it's affordable, it's really cheap, and there's a lot of targets to go around in that offense. In terms of cuts, Cincinnati really didn't have anybody that was shocking or something that if then statements
right, for sure.
for guys. Going back to the Colts, I know Jelani Woods was a guy that a lot of people were getting as a tight end 3, the athletic tight end. Well, he went down with a toe injury. It sounds like it's more significant than they let on. He is now officially out for the season, so they're going to be going with a plethora of tight ends. Evan Hull gets released, so that essentially means that Trey Sermon is the guy as the number 2. Technically, I guess number 3 behind Richardson, who has rushing upside as well. But yeah, that was not a ton to take away from the cuts, pup list wise, for either team.
Yep. And so we'll jump to the next game. It's going to be KC versus Chicago. Chicago rested their starters, which they hadn't really done this year. We had seen, Caleb Williams, of course, prior to this game. There's not a ton to talk about in this game, actually, at all. Look at this list. I mean, they had 10 players run the ball for them. So it's just they were trying to get as many looks as possible. There's a lot more to talk about on the Chiefs side of the ball. We did see today Deneric Prince, I believe, was waived. He wasn't cut. He was waived. I believe. So he's
either
gone.
Way, Carson Steele, who had that big highlight reel run where he stiff arms and then finishes the run with the score.
Right.
All of a sudden, he just comes out of nowhere to seemingly grab the RB2 role. CEH has been out for some time now, so we don't even know how much impact he'll have. But essentially, it's the Isaiah Pacheco of the show, but we're just thinking of 20th round.
Right.
Like, what are we going to do? Because all these guys that we got a ton of shares of in the 19, 20 rounds are obviously not there anymore because of the calls we made earlier in the season. A couple other names, Justin Ross, former Clemson Tiger that, had an injury and then came out. And we've been optimistic about him because of his talent. He just has never been able to stay healthy.
Right.
He finally gets cut. Kadarius Toney gets cut. Obviously, they bring in Juju Smith-Schuster again, who was cut by the Patriots, reuniting him after his 1-year deal 2 seasons prior. And we thought that move signaled that they were going to at least cut 1, maybe even 2 of these guys, and Kadarius Toney ended up being that second guy. We took some shares of him at the very end recently, but it's just flyers to try to get pieces if we did Mahomes or Kansas City stacks of that nature. But
right,
he
absolutely.
just has been absolutely atrocious since he's been in the NFL. He's been okay in spots, but he just has not put it together for a first round pick. And I just don't know if and when he will ever have another opportunity if he can't even make it work in Kansas City.
Right. And then the other guy, Luis Rees-Zammit, he was the rugby player. He also got let go earlier today. So we saw a lot of the running backs that were on the team that were still fighting for spots get let go. Another guy that I want to mention is Irv Smith Jr. a former second rounder. He is let go. I don't know that if he'll ever be back in the NFL. I think this could be the final time after multiple, seasons of just not producing. So he's a guy I wanted to say just for that reason. He might not. There might be the last time we see him. But yeah, I think this game is pretty simple. Anything else you want to add?
Some going back to Chicago, we were wondering with the running back situation because we've been very on board with this is going to be a committee approach. They're going to not just be workhorse rolling DeAndre Swift like a lot of people will lead you to believe. And Khalil Herbert had a great preseason. Roshan's been kind of banged up, so he really didn't have any preseason action after the Hall of Fame game. And Travis Homer, we thought would be a special teams guy. Well, they kept all 4 of them. And as of this recording, nobody sounds like they're on the move or anything of that nature. So it's truly 4 running backs that are going to be, on the 53-man roster. Maybe they leave one off,
Yeah.
to get down to the 46 on game days. But for now, all 4 are on the team, and I'm not sure how we'll react to it. But Khalil Herbert's rocketed up draft boards, and I just kind of see him having a big role as a 1B in the time being. And if he is not on the roster, then that just goes right into Rashawn.
Right,
Johnson.
of course. One guy that I will mention just for, the love of is Colin Johnson out of Texas. Didn't make it. He's a cousin. He's one of my good friends' cousins. So that was hard to see. We were hoping he would make it, but hopefully he can find another team, and that
Well,
would
it
be
sounds
cool.
like if he does clear waivers, he's going to be immediately brought back to the practice squad. So it
Oh,
sounds
good.
like he did enough to where he's going to stay within the team unless he is claimed. But yeah, he had a couple of highlight plays during the preseason as well.
Yep. And so we'll jump to the next game. It's going to be the the butt whooping by Jacksonville, 31-0 against the Falcons. And I will say, of course, we've had plenty of times where teams have gone 0-4 when they used to be 0-4 and then gone to the Super Bowl. That's not abnormal in the preseason, but you just don't like seeing teams get beat this bad. Atlanta needed a second quarterback. We've talked about that a couple times, and I'm glad that, at the end of the day, I guess it was the right decision somewhat. Not the right decision. It was a decision that they could have made bringing in Michael Penix because Taylor Heineke is just not very good at football. So that was tough. He's been pretty bad all offseason, and so that side of the ball. But on the other side, the ones did start and play for Jacksonville. Trevor looked good. Travis Etienne is the workhorse. Get more of him. If you're going to draft, make sure you get some of him. Evan Ingram had 2 touchdowns, which is, we've been talking about tight ends and how much value they have. Well, Evan Ingram's like, 8, 9, 10 on most drafts, on most boards. And if he's getting volume and getting touchdowns and he's still the 8th tight end, that's how good this tight end class or group of tight ends is that you can draft this year.
Yeah, and I know you've even have had even more love and praise for him as like a fantasy target. But yeah, my biggest thing was just he was always kind of inefficient. He's not a yak guy. He rarely gets in the end zone. Well,
Right.
if you're throwing him 2 end zone targets, every now and again, and he comes down with 1 or even 2, then you can't really leave him off your draft board. But again, Trevor Lawrence, like we expected to, everybody is down on him. You can tell that with ADP. He's just way too low for his talent, and he balled out. And I expect him to have a very, very strong bounce back season, probably a career year, because he hasn't really put it all together in its entirety. He's had stretches, but he has not had the full year. But maybe this year could be the year. Brian Thomas Jr. has really skyrocketed off boards because he is running 2 receiver sets. He's making explosive plays, and there was a reason that we liked him a lot.
Yeah, he was
in the draft.
He was our number 4 receiver. And we both, during that time we were like, oh, he should go top 15, top, 18-ish. And then he falls and Jacksonville gets a really good player. Actually, in my opinion, more I watch this team, I think this is the most balanced receiving core that I think that Trevor Lawrence has had. You don't have of course you don't have Calvin Ridley's talents and stuff like that, but balanced across the board, everybody good, can run routes, get open. I think this is one of the best teams that receiving cores he's had, and that just makes it that much easier in my opinion. So on the other side of the ball, there was no starters for Atlanta. Jace McClellan and Carlos Washington Jr. are still fighting over the running back 3 spot.
It
I'm
looks
not
like Carlos
sure.
Washington was
Did he?
cut. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Well, then Jace McClellan did enough to get the RB3 spot. Big fan of his. I'm coming out of Alabama. But yeah, not much to talk about with this game other than, the ones for Jacksonville looking really good.
Mm-hmm.
So the next grouping is going to be the game between the Miami game. And we'll talk about Miami first, if you want to.
Yeah, so from a pup perspective, Odell Beckham Jr., it's very strange that they've been very low hum about an injury or anything. He just hasn't participated in the entire camp. Like, he's been out. They haven't said anything, but now he's on the pup recovering from a surgery he had in the offseason. And they still haven't specified what it was for or anything of that nature. But at the end of the day, that's just a big boost to Malik Washington, who fell to them in the 6th round. He had a couple of explosive plays in the preseason, namely a 40-yard rush in the final preseason game. But, it's a high-powered offense that they're probably going to put up a ton of points. The problem is it going to be in the cold?
Right.
And, can they do well enough to keep up with the Jets and the Bills, who have very reasonable schedules in the first half of the years, and Miami's is kind of difficult as it goes on. So if they're not keeping up pace throughout the beginning of the season, that might be all she wrote. That's what we were saying when we were going out of state, talking about over-unders and stuff like that over the weekend. Miami's got to be, a certain level
Pretty
the first
perfect.
10 weeks to even have a shot to win this division. And, who knows how many teams can come out of this division. Everybody between the Jets, Bills, and Dolphins are plus money to miss.
Right.
So, we'll just kind of see what happens. But, not a ton of news other than that from that team.
Well, I will say also, one thing I was surprised by was that Mike White got beat out by Skylar Thompson. I thought Mike White was better than Skylar Thompson from what he had shown with his passing at the Jets. Skylar Thompson looked awful last 2 years ago when Tua went down, so I was surprised by that. Mike White has since been cut. Salvin Ahmed, who had started for Miami, I don't know, 2 years ago probably, has gotten cut. And Willie Snead, all longtime receivers. Malik Washington, though, I'm very happy with because we did have him in our top 20 receivers. Not much talk about him. Best slot receiver in football out of Virginia, 1,400 yards. Really good player. A little older.
And then on the defensive side of the ball, again, last year there was 2 late-year injuries with Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb going down in consecutive weeks. Bradley Chubb is going to start on the pup. Jalen Phillips will not. That doesn't guarantee that he'll be ready week 1, but that's an encouraging sign for him in that nature. But that is the other bit of news in terms of injuries.
Yep. And then looking at the Bucks, kind of similar to what we expect out of them. Of course, Jalen McMillan makes a big play, which is fun and stuff, but he is probably the number 3 in the offense. And I have the snaps here. Let me look at him. He's played every snap with these starters, but Mike Evans didn't play, so I'd expect him to obviously continue playing with the starters, but his production might go down when Mike Evans is on the field. But the starters were as followed: Chris Godwin, Jalen McMillan, Ryan Miller, Kate Otten, Baker, and Rashad White, and they played every play together. So that is who was starting for them.
And I don't think I was actually looking at info.com and they didn't have all of their cuts listed. But I know that Sterling Shepard, who we didn't really have much faith would be involved or even make the team at all, but he's a former teammate of Baker's at Oklahoma, so there was possibility as a 5th receiver, but I don't think we heard enough of him to warrant it. But
he did get cut.
Yeah. That was the one name I know that got cut. But I know there was a ton of receivers. Sean Tucker trying to vie for RB3 role behind Bucky and Rashad. Sounds like he made it as well. So
not a lot on this team. Pretty straightforward with expectations of what we had prior. So I think we can get on to the next one. And that game is the Raiders. Oh man, we had a bet on this game, guys.
dude,
Oh man,
it was so funny. We were at the blackjack table in a casino, and there was a game right behind, and we did a live bet because the 49ers were playing their starters, the Raiders were not. And the 49ers kicked a field goal in the first drive.
10. Yeah, they
And
went
so
up by
after
10.
4 minutes, the Raiders were plus 650 money line. That's like a 3-touchdown underdog or
Right.
down 3 scores kind of bet. And we took the live bet, and they tied.
So we pushed and didn't win. It was so sad. We were so close, guys. It was a really good pick by us for sure. But yeah, the Raiders, they didn't necessarily look great. With that being said, of course, like we said, San Francisco played their starters. Brock Purdy was in. Brock Purdy looked less than spectacular. Threw an interception, of course, and should have had another one picked when he threw it across the field. We talked about that when it happened. We were so surprised. He basically, and I remember, I think how you described it is he has to be good at not turning the ball over. He just has to be good at doing the right things because he's not the guy that's going to take over the game. And in that moment, he looked like he was trying to, and he doesn't have the arm talent to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So he should have been picked off. We should have had 2. And yeah, I was surprised for sure.
Yeah, I mean, there's not really a ton to take away. Once again, it's a common theme in this video for the preseason. I know Rob Bowers sat out. He's been kind of nursing a foot injury. Doesn't sound severe and doesn't sound like there's any shot that he misses. One interesting one that another kind of ho-hum is that Devontae Adams is dealing with something. And, there was vibes of maybe getting traded, unhappiness with the team. Nothing's come out, but it's just kind of worth keeping an eye on. He's dropping down boards right now in terms of ADP. He is now into the 3rd round. He's somebody that we did get shares of as a 2nd-round pick throughout the early portions and middle portions of the summer, just as a by default because we hated the 2nd round. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting to think about. There's a lot of people that are low on the Raiders and how they'll have a top 5 pick, but it's like when you have a top 10 defensive line and a top 10 offensive line, it's really hard to be just truly bad. I mean, I know Gardner Minshew is just a below average starter, above average backup, but he still led the Colts to a 9-8 record last year. So you can't tell me that just because he is taking over this year, they're just going to be a bottom 5 team.
Right. Yeah.
When they weren't last year.
And we have, a solid group of receivers. Like, we actually have a better skill group overall to me than he did. So that gives us even more. We're going to probably be a committee of running backs. We've actually seen that with Zamir White. That was something I wanted to talk about, was the Zamir White stuff. Is he's falling down boards because right now we're not sure how many, like, if he's going to get 60% of the snaps to be a true RB1, and he needs them because he's not the receiving back.
Yeah. Well, at least he finally rested this game after, playing into the second half of the first 2. But Alexander Madison did as well.
Mm-hmm.
Dylan Laub played a couple of snaps.
Yeah.
But we'll just kind of see what happens with that situation.
And then with the 49ers, Jordan Mason is the RB2.
Yes.
Elijah Mitchell has a season-ending injury that, of course, is terrible. But it was good to see Isaac Guerrero come back from injury and play. So I think he'll probably be RB3.
Matt Breida got cut.
Yeah.
Keyshawn Vaughn, who was brought in with all the injuries that they had. Still no news on Brandon Ayuk. Could happen any day now, but it's just kind of, again, we're over it at this point.
Yeah.
Like, make a decision or figure it out. The more significant one is that Trent Williams is truly just not there, and it sounds like this could linger into the season. And they have a big showdown on Monday Night Football against the number 1 defensive line in football, and they have a bottom 5 offensive line without Trent Williams. So we might be going heavy into the Jets if
gonna be awesome
staying that way.
And we're gonna have of course our power rankings show that we'll do, and we're gonna bring this up because it's gonna be hard for me to be like, well, I like San Francisco without all of these guys with all these issues that they're having. So we'll get into that later, but
they're having a true Super Bowl hangover, which
Yeah.
we typically see that out of the runner-up. We've seen multiple occasions where they fail to make the playoffs the following year, and it typically comes from the NFC for some reason. So the 49ers, with the teams that they have in their division, I don't think they should. It's not a shoe-in.
Right.
And we did a big division bet when we did go to Louisiana this past weekend, and we did not include this division because of the uncertainty with the 49ers. They don't deserve to be the second highest favorite on the board to us. And so they just kind of got to keep their eyes out because I see a scenario where they just kind of let things slip away.
And the Rams will jump on it. That's what,
Mhm.
they're going to be right there to jump on it. Carolina versus Buffalo's up next. Let's see. Here we go. The Carolina Panthers did start. Their starters played. Chuba Hubbard is the RB1 until at least for 4 weeks until Jonathan Brooks comes back, and maybe even longer based on health. So that's something you need to watch out for, basically. The guys that started and played, Deontay Johnson and Adam Thielen, were on the field for basically all 12 snaps. Jonathan Mingo and Xavier Legette were the other two that were trading in and out. And then Jatavian Sanders had 10 plays, 6 routes. That was good to see for him. So
Right. Yeah. I mean, it was just encouraging to see Bryce Young because I know he had the worst rookie season ever, but he didn't have a ton around him to, work. Now he's got an offensive coach. They brought in multiple weapons on every single level of the offense. So I expected him to have a bounce back season in addition to having the worst strength of schedule or the best strength of schedule from an optimistic perspective. So they'll be better than people think just based on record. But the biggest deal is just it's Deontay Johnson's show. Adam Thielen for now is going to be the default number 2, and then Legette, he's been dealing with multiple injuries over the training camp over the summer, and so it's going to be a slow burn for him. But we have a ton of him as a late round flyer for the late in the year to possibly be a breakout guy and have a stretch for us. But the biggest thing, like you said, Jonathan Brooks officially being on the pup, that just gives the Chuba Hubbard all the workload that he can handle for the first 4 weeks of the season. And I don't expect them to just instantly, as soon as Jonathan Brooks comes back, he's just dust.
right.
I think it'll be just a late in the year. He probably is going to have minimal impact, but the first half of the season, he should have any kind of flex appeal. And he's going in the 11th, 12th rounds right now. So he is a really solid value, especially if you are targeting Jonathan Brooks. If you're in redraft and you have our eligibility, you open up a roster spot anyway, and you just draft the backup, and you just have the Carolina starting running back the entire season.
Yeah, exactly. And then Miles Sanders is the backup. He's the RB2.
No cut, no trade
Nope.
yet.
Yeah, exactly. And then we'll jump over to the other side of the ball. The Buffalo Bills, they did not start their starters. Ben DiNucci started, and Frank Gore Jr. And then Frank Gore actually played most of the starter snaps, but then they did cut him.
Yeah.
Which I thought was interesting because he did get so much run, 18 carries for 101 yards and a touchdown.
Right.
And then immediately cut about 4 days later. That was surprising to me, but hey, that's what happens. That's the NFL.
Yeah. That was one of the, I guess, stories of the preseason was just hoping or rooting for this, Frank Gore Jr. We grew up watching Frank Gore Sr. and I think he finished his career with the Bills. I don't think he played for somebody else after that.
No, I don't think so. I think
but
you're right.
him going to the games and that's my boy kind of thing, it was really cool to watch. So hopefully he at least makes a practice squad somewhere, and then maybe is just kind of develops into a backup somewhere and has some kind of role. But Ben DiNucci, I don't miss you, but he is cut as well. One of the veterans on the offensive line that was cut that was notable was La'el Collins. So he just really hasn't been the same since he left Dallas. He had a significant injury his final season there, and so now I don't even know if he will make a roster following this cut.
Yep. Not much to say about the receivers. Basically playing a bunch of the 5, 6, 7 guys trying to find who's going to make the roster spots.
Yeah.
It's pretty
In
simple.
terms of ADP, Khalil Shakir is starting to pass Curtis Samuel again.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not on board with that whatsoever. He didn't play any 2 receiver sets. He's just playing slot snaps, if
Right.
that. And Curtis Samuel doesn't sound like he's going to miss any time. There's optimism that he's going to be ready week 1. There's actually even optimism that Marcus Valdez-Scantling, who's dealing with a neck injury, could be ready as well. I just don't see how he's just going to become a wide receiver 2 in this offense. So I am off the train that everybody else is on right now for Khalil Shakir.
Absolutely. And then the next game on the list will be the Baltimore Green Bay game. Baltimore sat their starters. They did actually. So I don't remember. Did Michael Pratt start? That was my question. I think he's. Yes, he did start and split direct reps with Sean Clifford, 18 and 18, and then Michael Pratt got cut today. Sean Clifford's on the team, so he will be. Did they both get cut? Because Malik will. I think they might have actually both get cut. Right? Is that what? Yeah. Okay.
I
So
think
they both got cut.
Because
Yes.
Malik Willis got
Yeah.
traded there over
Yes.
the weekend as well. So it sounded like he was going to be at least the emergency quarterback, but probably end up being the QB2.
Crazy though.
In Green Bay.
Yeah, not a single snap basically, and then both of the guys that have been there all offseason are cut. Their running back situation is very weird now because we of course had Marshawn Lloyd, who was on injury. He did not make the pup. It's because they're so short at running back most likely. And then AJ Dillon out for the year.
Yeah, that kind of came out of nowhere. Sounded like he was in his best shape ever. I had less than 5 shares of him through my 250 drafts,
Right.
and I don't remember, us prioritizing him either. So it's good news for Marshawn Lloyd because it's less competition when he does come back. But I do expect him to miss a game or 2, maybe even 3. But for now, they had to, they're just really short on running back. So of all these guys that did get cut, just look out for Green Bay to be the guy to pick somebody up. But it is truly the Josh Jacobs workhorse show. We'll be talking about him a lot in our rankings. He didn't really move up in front of anybody, but he's kind of moving up into the tier that he was kind of straddling between. So,
yep. And then if you look at the other side of the ball, looking at the Ravens, one thing that I thought was really interesting about the Ravens is they had 6 receivers play at least 6 snaps with the starters. That is always, telling of, real who's the wide receiver for in this offense. We just don't know right now. It's 6 different guys: Tylan Wallace, Anthony Miller, Keith Kirkwood, Malik Cunningham, Dayton Wade, and Tez Walker, all running 3 or 4 routes, trying almost all of them getting a single target. It was just a lot, and they're trying to figure out what they're going to do at their wide receiver position.
Right, and then in terms of PUP news, Keaton Mitchell, this was another one that was expected that he was a late season ACL injury. He's on the PUP. So Justice Hill is right now the for sure RB2.
Right.
But that's even slightly a better thing because I know that he will have 0 goal line upside. He will have 0 important touches. He also can be the passing game guy.
Mm-hmm.
So if they're down 10, it's not going to be Derrick Henry in the game for the entire time. If they are in 2-minute drill, he's probably the guy that's going to get a couple of receptions trying to get into field goal range. That's relevant when you're looking at a 19th, 20th rounder as a flyer, last man in on your roster for best ball. Obviously has no upside unless Derrick Henry goes down in a redraft league. But just for sure knowing that he has that role is very encouraging to say the least.
Right. And then of the 3 guys that played quarterback in this game for Baltimore, the only one that stayed on the team is Josh Johnson. The other 2 got cut. The other thing I wanted to say was Owen Wright got cut, and he was kind of battling for RB3. Of course, Keaton Mitchell is probably the RB3 when he comes back, but they were battling for that spot. Instead of him, it's going to most likely be Rasheen Ali, who out of Marshall, who we had talked about last week or 2 weeks ago, who was returning kicks and receiving and all kinds of stuff. So he's an interesting guy, not for fantasy value, but things happen really quickly. If one of them goes down, Rasheen Ali is a possible guy you could pick up. But yeah, that was a pretty easy one too. I mean, it's, not a lot to talk about on some of these games, just so much injury or so many guys getting cut. But and all playing the fours. The next game we're going to talk about is Pittsburgh, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, let's do it. All right, the Pittsburgh-Detroit game. Here we go. Justin Fields does play, and Russell Wilson. The starter in this game was
It was Russell.
Russ. Okay, yeah.
He played one series, threw a couple passes, and then just got out of there. Had a nice one on the sideline to George Pickens. As long as Brandon Ayuk is not traded there, I love that he is just going to have a 30+% target share because there's truly no one else on that team that is going to come close to competing for the amount of touches he's going to have.
Yeah, George Pickens will be the main receiver. And then on top of that, you got to remember Roman Wilson was injured, so he's not even really doing anything with the. Well, he's practicing with the team, of course, but Van Jefferson and Calvin Austin are the wide receiver 2 and 3. Again, I'm worried about Pat Freiermuth. He is worrying the heck out of me because Darnell Washington plays more snaps. We've seen Arthur Smith, do crazy things with Jonnu Smith in the past. And I'm not getting very much Pat because of this situation and what we're going through right now with him.
He's kind of going in a similar situation with Cole Kmet, who's sharing snaps with Gerald Everett.
Right.
Basically, both of them sum up the reason behind our premise of you need to get a elite tight end in any format, shape, or form. If you're in a fantasy league, whether that's redraft, best ball, it doesn't matter. Get at least one elite one, and then a second one before you hit after Dallas Goedert, because after that, it absolutely plummets.
Mm-hmm.
Now Taysom Hill is becoming the popular tight end 13 right now, and over T.J. Hawkinson, who is also going to be on the pup.
Right, of course.
It's really bad, and it's very nerve-wracking for both of those guys, and it's just the epitome of what we're saying is this is not the year to just go 3 tight ends and just get a couple committee guys and hope for the best. This is get 2 guys, feel great about it, get 12, 15 points a week, move on to another position.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's just a scary position of not. If you're in a 12-league team, at least one team isn't going to get an elite. We're expecting, we have in our first tier 5 guys. And then our second tier, we have 6. And those 2 tiers are where you want to get. Those 11 guys are the guys you want to get. And if you don't get them, you're staring down the barrel at that point because you hopefully really, really secured some other positions, basically. Right. So Pittsburgh, Justin Fields and Russ look good again, except for Justin Fields holds the ball too long. 2 sacks, and that's been something we've talked about with him for a long time. I'm wondering what's going to happen because there is still an open quarterback battle going on there.
Yeah, there hasn't been an official announcement. It just feels like it's going to be Russ to start because Justin Fields, despite his positive practice reports, he hasn't done enough in the preseason. He's botched snaps. He's holding to the ball too long. And his problem hasn't been his arm. It hasn't been his legs. It's straight up been his decision-making when it comes down to it. And those that believe that he could do the same thing with what Chicago's about to do are full of it. They don't know what they're talking about. There's a reason that he went for a conditional 5th-round pick. It's just disappointing that he's not going to get the full run because Pittsburgh, Russell's not going to be your starter next year. Justin Fields could be, and you could get him at a reasonable deal if he does prove it, and get him with all the contract skyrocketing, getting him for close to $30 million, which will be a steal for your starting quarterback. And not playing him is not something ideal if you're trying to play towards your future. But we'll just kind of see. I expect both to get playing time this season, but it may be later than we're hoping for Justin Fields.
And then the other guy I want to say something about is Cordero Patterson. He just got his touches and made the most of them. Let me rephrase that. He got 1 touch and made the most of it, which was 1 rush for 31 yards. He's still going to be one of Arthur Smith's favorite guys, and that scares me a little bit. He'll get some touches here and there.
That scares me more for honestly
Jaylen Warren, yeah, I was thinking the same thing.
Because Najee is going to get 8 to 10 touchdowns this year. It just depends on does he have the 40, 50 targets that he typically gets? Is he going to just have a 10 carry, nothing else, and hope you pray for a touchdown.
And the goal line work, yeah.
And then with Jalen Warren, obviously he's coming off an injury. It sounds like he's optimistic that he can be ready for week 1, but he's the one that's saying that. He's, when you don't want to always trust what players say, because the coach can be like, we got 18 weeks to play. You're
Right.
sitting down for a couple games, but obviously he's down the pipe. We didn't think there was any chance he would make that, but Cordell Patterson, especially with the lack of wide receivers, he's going to be involved in some way, shape, or form throughout the year.
Yep. And then we'll go to the next game. The next game is Houston versus the Rams. Let's see. There we go. No starters, and actually, funny enough, the Rams didn't play Stetson Bennett, which was, it's always fun to make those jokes because he played every snap so far in the preseason up to this game. I guess I don't know what that means necessarily for him. I don't believe he obviously didn't get cut because they didn't have a backup quarterback with Jimmy G on suspension. So it's just what is going on in LA behind the starters. Boston Scott played. Zach Evans split. They split snaps with the ones. I'm expecting one of them to get cut.
Both got cut.
Both got cut. Perfect.
Yeah, it was funny because they were basically the only 2 running backs to get any kind of work all preseason, and they still were like, thanks.
Yeah.
But no. And I don't even know if they're going to have a third running back or if they're just going to roll with Kyron and Blake Corum. Apparently, Kyron's eligible to be doing punt returns this year, which is going to be interesting.
I love that.
Sure. Cool. Just don't get hurt, please.
As long as he scores a couple times.
But yeah, I mean, the Rams are kind of known for just not playing their guys. They didn't really make any moves that were crazy. We knew Tyler Higbee was not going to play the first 4 weeks, let alone maybe not even the season. So Kobe Parkinson will be their starting tight end. That's just pretty much it for the Los Angeles Rams and their kind of quiet preseason.
Yep. And then guy we want to talk about with the Texans is Cam Akers.
Yep.
He's had 2 Achilles tears in his career, and then he's spinning 3 times on the same play.
Guys,
he's doing the most.
He made the team. That was one of the best preseason stories to me. Comeback wise, Jahar Jordan was supposed to be getting a ton of work, and he got next to no work in the preseason, gets cut. Great sign for him. And then on top of that, Dameon Pierce hasn't made the most of his opportunities. So maybe Cam Akers is inheriting an RB2 role behind a guy that is not been participating. He's been banged up.
And he's old.
Yeah. So you just never know. And it's a highly potent offense. So maybe he won't be the 20-touch game guy that we were hoping he could be a couple of years ago. But right now he's free everywhere.
And he's got a job. With him, it's always been can he be on the field? He lost his explosion the year after he had gotten injured the first time. And so it looks good. It looks great to see him, doing these things. Now he's back after a second year, which always feels better. A couple guys that matter on the cut list to me are on defense. You have CJ Henderson, who they signed. He was a first-round draft pick out of Jacksonville, number 9, I believe, overall.
It was 7.
7?
No.
I think.
Well, he was top 10 either way.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was his third stop and probably his last stop.
Yeah.
But they signed a ton of top 5 picks from the cornerback position. Former Jeff Okudah, it sounds like he made the team, which was welcoming. But Lonnie Johnson, who they brought back in from the Saints, got cut. Desmond King was in his second stint. He got cut. So kind of condensed down that secondary pretty good. And then the bigger surprise to me was Noah Brown got cut. Obviously, this is the deepest receiving core.
Right.
I know we said who we were talking about the receiving core earlier.
I don't know. Kansas City maybe would be one that I would talk about.
But either way, they were just so deep. We heard that John Mechie was getting calls for potential getting moved on from, but I feel like this Noah Brown news would kind of signal that he's staying. Xavier Hutchinson was making plays and he made the team. Ben Skoranek made plays and he did not.
Yeah.
They brought him in for a flyer.
It's just, I think there's a lot of guys that were pretty good that got cut off of this team, and it's very interesting. Cephas, Quintez Cephas, his speedster, he got cut. So yeah, I just think that there's a lot of guys that didn't make it. I think they were kind of playing for their job on this last game. John Mechie, like you said, played in this game. Xavier Hutchinson played in this game. So those types of guys, but good to see things from Cam Akers. He's just running wild, and otherwise, I think this is pretty solid team. I was actually surprised that they got rid of Desmond King. That was one of the ones I was surprised by because he's pretty cheap and he's a little older, so he might bring that veteran presence that they really do not have. They have some young guys back there.
Right. I want to look up their updated depth chart on their secondary just to see who's left.
Right, for sure.
Because I didn't expect that many DBs to get moved on from. But obviously, Jalen Petrie is a rising star as a nickel slash safety.
Yeah, Kalen Bullock, the rookie, is there from USC.
And Kamar Lassiter was a second rounder that, obviously he's in the starting spot right now.
Yeah.
Jeff Okuda, obviously we mentioned him. Jimmy Ward has been the veteran presence. He's the captain on the team. And then Derek Stingley, obviously rising corner. Eric Murray, I remember him from Kansas City. I don't know if he's done much with Houston, but he's on the team now. So, yeah.
And then we're going to jump over to it's Minnesota versus Philly. And there we go. And none of the starters played in this game for either team. Kenny Pickett still playing. He's actually came in second, which was weird. Oh, no. Sorry. Kenny Pickett started. He played 24 plays, only had 9 passes on those plays. I saw Tanner McKee was getting a lot of reps with the twos. So I think they're kind of fighting over a spot for that. But let's see if he got cut, actually.
I don't think he did. Will Greer was the only guy that got cut or is at least listed.
So, yeah.
From the quarterback position. Obviously, they also traded within the division for Jahan Dotson. We've talked about it. We did a tweet that, that made him plummet down our rankings because he is fighting for being the 4th option on that team with Dallas Goedert. And, I just don't think there's enough to go around for him. But, it makes them stronger.
Yes.
From a fantasy perspective.
Another guy that got cut, John Ross, who's,
former
a speedster.
40 record holder.
Yeah.
Caden Stearns.
And then CJ Uzoma, tight end that played for Cincinnati and had a very relevant tight end season back in the day. He got cut also. So lots of guys actually, that I thought could have made this team are out. Tyrion Davis Price, a guy that came from San Francisco, off the team. Julian Okwara was a surprise to me, especially with the fact that Hassan Reddick being gone. I thought Okwara would be a guy that would make the team defensively. Paris Campbell was the big one. That's who I was trying to figure out. Paris Campbell getting cut was huge because that means Johnny Wilson, who got injured last week, is probably the number 4 on the team now that Jahan Dotson is there. So bringing Jahan Dotson in, getting rid of Paris Campbell is basically the swap that they did. Big upgrade, big time upgrade there.
Right. And then with Minnesota, obviously they didn't really play a ton of guys that were relevant. A bunch of the guys that got most of the touches were cut. Myles Gaskin, Dwayne McBride, I believe.
Yes, he did. Yes.
He got cut as well. N'Keal Harry, the tight end, former 1st-round pick, is no longer on the roster. And they were just kind of playing it. Lewisine, former 1st-rounder.
Yeah, that was surprising.
Was cut as well. Nashawn Wright, who they traded with Dallas a couple weeks ago, he was cut as well.
And then I thought, I was gonna say Kene in Wongwu, he also was cut. So they don't really have very many running backs. Mo Ibrahim was cut. Like you said, Dwayne McBride. Their running back are literally just right now Ty Chandler and Aaron Jones. I thought that was interesting. Take away from everything that happened.
Yeah, you typically don't see teams take 2 running backs, so I'm assuming they're another team that will be looking at the streets for waiver claims and whatnot at that position.
Yep. And then we're going to talk about Los Angeles Chargers and the Dallas Cowboys.
Oh, and one last thing for the Vikings. Obviously, TJ Hawkinson officially on the PUP as well. We had a feeling that he would be. They're not going to rush him back, and so he'll be missing the first 4 games for sure.
In this next game, though, the Chargers, there was a guy. Okay, there's a few things the Chargers. We actually have a bunch of takeaways for them, which is fun. Their tight end spot to start. We have had issues with Donald Parham in the past with just showdown slates and stuff like that, because he'll have 2 catches, 4 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And so he actually just recently got cut. It is finally Stone Smart who is going to be the tight end 3. A lot of people are big on him. Another, of course, position that is of importance to us is the running back position. Isaiah Spiller gets cut, and Kamani Vidal sits, which makes us believe that he is the running back 3. And we were right. Thank God, because we were worried.
But it is also worth noting they did keep Jared Patterson.
They did, yes.
So, again, that's not really concerning for any of them. It's just mainly because every single running back has issues, and it's just hard to rely on anybody. So, and it's not that crazy for teams to keep 4 running backs for special teams purposes.
Yes, and so that was
Easton Stick is terrible.
He is so bad.
He is not very good, but he made the team. Max Duggan was the one that did get cut. He didn't get any preseason action in that final game, but former national champion runner-up with TCU. Cornelius Johnson was just he wasn't drafted.
He was a 7th rounder.
7th rounder.
Him and Brendan Rice, basically.
He was the wide receiver 2 for the Michigan Wolverines. He is not on the team. They had a plethora of receivers that they were fighting for roster spots, and he was kind of the odd man out. It seems like Simi Fehoko, who had a big play, saved his spot on that one.
Well, also don't forget about Darius Davis, who took off on a jet sweep to take it to the house. Both of those guys making those big plays might have really put them into that contention. Brendan Rice, he has been going up ever since the preseason started. He, of course, has started in this game. First game, he was like the 7th receiver. This game, he's, got 8 snaps with the starters, out as soon as it's done. And so he is going to be on the team, possibly the wide receiver 4.
And then your boy Alex Leatherwood was cut as well.
Oh, lucky me.
Defensively, nothing really a surprise in our eyes. And then, obviously, PUP-wise, I don't think that they had anybody that is out for the season or going to make that.
Yep. And then on the other side of the ball, it was the Trey Lance show, if you can call it that, I guess. He had 49 passes, which is not his wheelhouse. Let's just be very honest about it. Dallas was trying to make him chunk it. But he threw 5 interceptions in those 49 passes. That's not very good ever. 1 touchdown. He did have, a solid stat line other than the interceptions, but those are going to really, really stand out. The best part about him, though, is that he can run the ball. 11 for 90 and a touchdown. 46-yard long. Like, those types of things make it not that it's okay to throw 5 interceptions, but it makes it like, okay, maybe we can keep this guy around and maybe he can slowly get better at that passing stuff, but he can do things that other people already cannot do.
But it was interesting, despite the 5 picks, they still kept him on the roster. So he and Cooper Rush are going to roll with 3 quarterbacks, probably just going to be not dressing too, because there's an emergency quarterback rule, but neither of them got cut. So it sounds like nobody really truly won the for sure QB2 job.
Right. And then at the running back position, Deuce Vaughn, Malik Davis, and Royce Freeman all get 14 to 18 rushes. They're looking for their RB3. Unless they bring somebody in, and I don't know who got cut.
So Malik Davis and Royce Freeman got cut. Sounds like Dalvin Cook had a visit today, and who knows what we'll make of that. But I've said before, I think that this is the Ezekiel Elliott show, and if it's not, it doesn't mean that it's the Rico Dowdle show.
Right.
I think they bring in somebody else if Zeke is not panning out like they would hope. He didn't have any action in the preseason, so we don't even know what the sample size or what the workload would even be like. But we think he'll get all the important touches, including in the red zone for a high-scoring offense. And if Rico Dowdle is the guy making more of the opportunities, I still think they bring in somebody else. Rico Dowdle has passed Zeke on every platform in terms of ADP, and I'm not buying it right now.
Fair enough. And then y'all did have a trade with Peyton Hendershot.
Going
Go ahead.
2026 conditional 7th round pick. They were basically
Beautiful.
got the most out of him they could, but he goes to Kansas City. Was kind of surprising because Dallas typically rolls with 3 to 4 tight ends, and so now I think that only leaves 2. Let me look up their depth chart real quick. But
is Brevin Spanford still there? He would be the 3rd. I don't think he got cut. I think he's the 3rd.
Yeah, it sounds like he and John Stevens Jr.
Yeah.
is still on the roster as of right now. But Luke Schoonmaker is tight end 2. Jay Ferguson, obviously, we love him. Tight end 1. Nothing really too surprising in terms of cuts.
I think that, with Brevin Spanford, he's basically a blocking tight end. He came out of Minnesota, so they like having those guys. So I think he makes sense.
Carl Lawson that they brought in, for depth at, the defensive line position, or defensive end rather. He was cut as well. Offensive line only cut 3 linemen, so they pretty much kept who they had. And it's just kind of rolling out with a roster that is kind of depleted from last year.
Right. And then
and also Deron Bland over the weekend broke his foot.
Yes.
He is going to be out 6 to 8 weeks. I didn't hear whether he's on the PUP list or not. But yeah, that was a significant blow for a guy that just set the record for pick sixes in the season.
Yep. And then I do want to put this out there, guys. We had one of the best performances defensively that we've seen in the preseason by the Chargers' Tony Jefferson. He had 14 total tackles, a sack, and a tackle for loss. And then he also had 2 interceptions during the game. He was just kind of everywhere. He basically bought his roster spot this last game against Dallas.
I mean, it's a feel-good thing because I don't think he played he didn't play last year. He's a 32-year-old safety veteran. He's been in the league since 2013. Obviously he was with the Ravens before.
Yes.
On 2 different stints, and then the Cardinals is his biggest stint. So welcome inside. He made the team solely based off that performance because it was pretty incredible.
Yeah, he looked awesome. And I don't know that we'll see another performance out of him like that. And then the 2 New York teams, you got the Jets and the Giants. Tommy DeVito's not very good at football, guys. Sorry to let you know, if something happens to Daniel Jones, it's worse actually behind him. I don't even know does Tommy DeVito still on the team?
Yeah, he did.
Okay. I mean, I feel like he had to, but like I could have seen them cutting him because holy crap, he's just not very good. So there's that.
They didn't really have any surprising cuts. Darnay Holmes was cut as a DB. Their DBs were bad to begin with, and
Trey Herndon was also cut.
And then obviously Allen Robinson, which I heard nothing about him while he was on the Giants. It was Darius Slayton making plays and making sure he stayed the wide receiver 2 on the team.
And then both Isaiah McKenzie and Isaiah Hodgins both got cut. We've actually seen Isaiah Hodgins be an okay option in fantasy on a team with no other targets, basically. There's no one there. You can kind of make your way, I guess. But yeah, so there's not much to talk about with New York. They suck. It's basically how I look at it. Now, the green New York, the other side of New York, they're a little bit better. Not necessarily with their backups because they did not play their starters. And by not play their starters, I mean they didn't even play their first 3 running backs in this game. So we didn't see much, but they are better right now than the counterparts at MetLife Stadium.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. Again, not much takeaways. They've kind of rested throughout, especially in this last game, and they've got a really soft part of the schedule to start the year. So they could be much stronger than people think, and it's kind of surprising after the noisy offseason that they've had so far.
Yeah, I can't wait to talk about our schedule predictions pretty soon coming up. But yeah, so getting on to the next game, because there's just not much to talk about in New York right now. We are going to look at Seattle and Cleveland. And let me go ahead and get on here. Sorry.
Good. So obviously big news was Nick Chubb. Squatting does not mean that you're ready to get off the PUP list. Shocker. He's going to start the year on the PUP. that was expected. We weren't shocked by it at all. But the bigger shock was because we knew that was coming, Deontay Foreman gets cut. And so that leaves Jerome Ford, and it leaves, why is his name slipping my mind? Pierre Strong.
Yeah, Pierre Strong.
Who they brought in
Receiving
last
back.
year, receiving back.
Yeah.
So it's just those two guys, I believe. And so it's going to be rolling with them the first month of the season. We've been on Jerome Ford all offseason as a value. Haven't gotten as much as probably we would love. We would be high-fiving if it was just one of our highest owned guys. But it's a healthy amount that, we feel pretty good about where we've gotten him.
Yeah.
But he's going to be a big riser after this news officially has broken, and he'll probably creep into the top 100 pretty soon.
Yeah, and then if you look, also another thing I want to talk about is they kept 4 quarterbacks. That was,
so
a little weird.
Sounds like Jameis Winston and other guys like Tyler Huntley and Dorian Thompson-Robinson, who both of those guys had pretty solid last games, especially Tyler Huntley. But Jameis Winston sounded like there could be teams that are looking into moving or trading for him rather. So we'll just kind of see, but teams don't keep forward quarterbacks, so I expect something to come out pretty soon about one of them.
Yep, and then we can jump over to Seattle. Looking at them, they did play their starters. I don't know who's better between Geno Smith and Sam Howell, honestly, right now. I'm guessing that it just depends on your flavor, kind of like we talked about before. Sam Howell's going to gunslinger, while Geno Smith is going to kind of slowly pick you apart. So that situation is interesting. Of course, Geno Smith did start. He played a total of 5 snaps.
Yeah, it was a quick 5-play drive that ended in a score to DK Metcalf. Obviously, Tyler Lockett didn't play. He's been banged up. But JSN made a couple of highlight grabs, and then DK with his touchdown. It's a more potent offense. Kenneth Walker didn't play, but he will be the workhorse in this offense.
Right.
And we're excited about him as well. I don't know. It's funny because after Jason has his solid performance with Geno, everybody's like, he's a value. And I was like, when I first went through the ADPs this year, way back in early June, I was just like, who stands out? He was the first person that I texted you. And I was like, I want that guy.
Oh, yeah,
and
so much of him.
He didn't move one time until last week. He was in the 90s the entire offseason. I'm just like, guys, this offense is going to be better than you think, and it adheres to his skill set. It's perfect for him.
Yeah.
He's going to have a breakout year, and our ranking is probably the floor of what he should expect if he stays healthy. And now people are finally jumping on board, and it's just like, it feels good knowing it's like, we called that way back when, and we can pull tape because now we can do that since we got a podcast.
Yeah, right. Hey, we don't have to bring up messages, right?
Right.
And just be like, look, we have it right here. But yeah, and then Kenny McIntosh, he had a 1 rush for 56 yards and a touchdown. That was pretty cool. He was also with the starters because they didn't play Kenneth Walker or Zach. Charbonnet. So he's, I guess, the number 3.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he did make the team. In terms of receivers, the only one that of note was Joyner Eskridge that got cut.
Right.
He played a little bit last year with them, so that's why it's relevant. Defense-wise, I don't believe I saw anything that was crazy.
Nope. No. Looks pretty normal.
Okay.
Except, nope, nothing crazy. Sam Howell did give up 2 sacks, which I thought was interesting because he's the guy that came in second. He should, he's the gunslinger. He gets rid of the ball pretty quick normally, so surprised by that compared to the other side of the ball. But the next game we're going to look at is New Orleans and Tennessee. Pop it up.
Yeah, so Will Levis is continuing to have a really, really under-the-radar impressive camp and preseason. He goes 7 for 8, 118. He looked really good. Calvin Ridley caught a couple of his balls. I don't know. I think that I have good vibes on him. We were actually talking because, we'll talk about the Broncos to end it shortly, but, with Bo Nix now being the starter, how do you kind of assess, Will Levis versus Bryce Young versus Sam Darnold versus, obviously in redraft, we're not touching any of these guys, but we're thinking, I need a QB3 draft. who's the third guy in. And I don't know. I just have really good vibes about this offense and what he can provide. Kind of have a sneaky good season in terms of being fantasy relevant. And he's got the weapons to do it. None of them, not one of them, will be on the team in 2 to 3 years. But for now, I think it works. They all kind of match each other's skill sets, and it sounds like DeAndre Hopkins will be ready week 1 as well.
Right. Other guys to talk about, Malik Willis played in this game and now is not on the team anymore. We talked about him going to Green Bay. So it is just Will Levis and Mason Rudolph. We actually brought that up a couple weeks ago. I said that, Mason Rudolph looked pretty good. I think that he was going to be the quarterback too. And he is. And they got rid of Malik Willis. I guess Green Bay gets a guy that's a little bit of a better athlete and can run the ball, but I'm confident that now I know what the Titans want to do with their quarterbacks. They are both stand in the pocket, throw the ball types of guys.
Mm-hmm.
For running backs wise, we're going to get exactly what we expected out of the Titans running backs. In this particular game, Tony Pollard got 11 snaps while Tyjae Spears got 7.
And they all came after Tony's pretty much, which I still expect them to do mostly a split backfield, maybe lean a little bit into Tony Pollard more. But both of them kind of complement a pass-heavy offense, and if they're not heavily relied upon, they should both be relevant in terms of fantasy. A couple of notable guys that did get cut, former first-rounders, Shane Ray, who's been a journeyman since he was not a guy in Denver, and then Caleb Farley, who was drafted a couple of years in the first round as a cornerback. They just have had a tough time drafting from that position, but they brought in a couple of guys, and their secondary is actually pretty formidable this year. Bringing in obviously L'Jarius Sneed, and then what's their other one? Chidobe Awuzie, and then Quandre Diggs they signed as well. Monty Hooker's a good safety, and then Jamal Adams. I don't know if he's even relevant anymore, but he's
present
in there. He's present.
Yeah, presence is always a thing, right? One thing about Caleb Farley is I actually really liked him a lot, but tore his ACL before he came out, and he's just never been the same.
And their front line is going to be very, very tough to move when they've got Sebastian Joseph Day, Tavondre Sweat, and Jeffrey Simmons up front. It's going to be hard to run on them for sure. Despite it sounds like they're projecting to be 4th in the division, they're going to be probably the best 4th place team. Right. If that even happens.
Absolutely. And they don't have necessarily the hardest division. I know that, I think all the teams in that division are kind of like, who's going to take the real next step? So we'll see when that comes up. But the next game on the board is Denver versus Arizona. We'll have 2 more and then we'll get out of here. So Arizona started Clayton Tune. Desmond Ridder gets cut from the team after, just not being good.
That might have been the worst instant lose-lose trade of all time between Desmond Ridder and Rondell Moore.
Right.
Obviously, Rondell, season-ending injury, you can't really do anything about that, but he wasn't having a great camp to begin with. And then Desmond Ridder, former second-round quarterback that gets traded to Arizona to be the clear 2, and he doesn't beat out Clayton Tune.
Yeah. Clayton Tune, man. This is Houston, right? Clayton Tune's from Houston, right? Yep. There you go. That's why. But yeah, nothing really to take away from like the receiving core or the running backs for the Cardinals. I did think it was interesting that Hassan Hall played basically the whole time after Tony Jones Jr. came out. 19 rushes, nothing special to note of his touches. I guess he did have 4 receptions, nothing crazy. Receiving wise, a bunch of guys that were fighting for spots. Nothing that stood out, I guess.
And another guy that was cut, obviously, he's kind of had a short career out of nowhere after being a first-round pick in 2023, but Miles Murphy gets cut.
Mm-hmm.
He was a first-round pick towards ACL, then goes to Arizona to try to make a roster spot, and he does not. Typically, unless it's bad character situations, you don't really see first-rounders kind of lose out on multiple teams like that.
Right, absolutely. And then on the Denver side of the ball, Bo Nix sits. He's the starter. They also sat all their running back, their main running backs. Samaje Perine does get cut, which is exactly what we expected. But we've had all kinds of reports going like this year for the Denver Broncos. So it's good to see that we were right on that. So Audric Estime, Joel McLaughlin, and Javonte Williams are going to be the 3 running backs that like we said.
And obviously, throughout most of the offseason, we've kind of scoffed at, Jaleel McLaughlin being any kind of relevant or pushing, because we thought that, they would keep 4 backs and Samaje would be just eating into his pass catching role. Well, if it's just straight up going to be Javonte and Jaleel, I don't mind either one of them based on their ADP right now. He kind of leveled out, and really since that news hasn't moved up at all. So we actually moved him into our top 50 running backs because he just has a clear defined role, and not many RB2s can say that. And with Audric Estime, it sounds like he's just going to be a pure handcuff. But if Javonte goes down, Jaleel McLaughlin's not getting the goal line work. It's going to be Audric Estime. He scored a couple touchdowns this preseason, had pretty solid. Other than his fumble, he had his first game. The receiving core was interesting because, there was just a bunch in the air of what was going to happen. It didn't sound like Troy Franklin was having a good camp, and that he could be like a wide receiver 6 to start the team, or even possibly be a cut candidate, which would have been a atrocious fall from Grace
Top
that
10.
we had on him.
Yeah, we had a top 10 on him.
Well, he ends up making the team, obviously, which should be expected. But Tim Patrick, who has a nice comeback after back-to-back years going down season-ending injury before the season even starts, had a pretty solid couple games, and he gets cut. Sounds like he's going to be immediately picked up, maybe by even the Lions. Only kept 4 receivers. Lil Jordan Humphrey was another guy that was kind of eating into 3 receiver sets. He was cut as well. Philip Dorsett, journeyman, gets cut. So sounds like they were just going to go with, a lesser receiving quantity than even beat reporters thought.
Yeah, they have 5 receivers on the team at this point, and Troy Franklin and Marvin Mims are basically going to be fighting over the outside receiver spot that was left by Tim Patrick. Both young guys. I think it's if you're Sean Payton, I think that if you were targeting this idea, it makes a lot of sense going with the younger guys. I just feel bad for Tim Patrick because he's been through so much to get to this point, but I think based on his performance, he's obviously, like you said, going to possibly be a Lion, and he will be picked up no matter what. He is going to be a priority pickup. Otherwise, for this game, let me look at the snap counts for everybody. It looks like Troy Franklin, David Sills the 5th, and Devon Vele started in this game. Troy Franklin basically and David Sills were the 2 guys, but David Sills did get cut. So I believe, right?
Yes,
okay,
he got cut.
Yeah, so he got cut. So Troy Franklin was the guy that actually made the team along with Vele.
It sounded like we follow a beat reporter for the Denver Broncos, Benjamin Albright, and he sounded very optimistic that Devon Vele could really be cutting into, 3 receiver set time as well. So he could be a kind of dart throw out of nowhere if you're looking for a last guy in best ball with the final. We got a week to go at this point.
And they did take all 3 quarterbacks. I think that this is one of the most. It's not a better quarterback situation, but if you put any of the quarterbacks in, I don't think that you have a terrible situation based on the fact that they have an okay defense. They can run the ball, and they have a plethora of receivers that I think can catch the ball and run good routes. So, yep, that's the Denver Broncos. Let's go see the last game, which is New England versus Washington. New England is an interesting side of the ball, especially at the quarterback position.
Yeah, so once again, Jacoby Brissett struggles in his time, and then Drake May has a really, really strong game. A couple of highlight plays, touchdown that gets called back. He looked really good, and I know Patriots fans are going to be excited. I promise you, it is in your best interest to just eat the bad year and let him sit, because it is going to destroy him, Sam Darnold style, if he plays a significant portion of this season. It's a very bad offensive line now, which we're not accustomed to seeing in New England. They've always kind of been strong at finding linemen, and it just looks like they just keep on allowing pressures, and It doesn't look good up front. And then Bailey Zappi gets cut. Obviously, it was interesting that they kept, or not interesting that they kept Joe Milton, but the fact that they drafted him was interesting to begin
Right.
with. But he didn't do great. 5 of 17. However, he's got 90-yard arm, and
5 is what he said, I think.
he's just a highlight reel player that if you want to keep on your roster as the third quarterback, go right ahead. I don't have much confidence in his ceiling. However, it is there based on the intangible, or not the intangibles, but the attributes that he has
Right.
throwing the football.
Well, one thing I was saying, we were talking about this earlier, is like he could end up being Taysom Hill-esque. Like they might decide like, hey, you can play the H-back position and you can do this and you can do that. It wouldn't surprise me because he is kind of that build. He's a good athlete, and he's such a good athlete that you might want to keep him on your team for those reasons also. Not saying that you will, but you could. But yeah, so not much happened in this game for New England. They still went 4 receivers out there. Joe Milton did not look good, and that kind of drives home the point that he might not ever be a quarterback. But and then the other guys, of course, like Cam said, they have to figure out what they're going to do at quarterback, and their best option is to leave Jacoby Brissett out there and win 3 games.
Yeah, I mean, what was interesting, obviously, other than Ramondre being a workhorse or Antonio Gibson being a handcuff, like the receiving core has been the biggest, like, what's going to happen there? Well, Kendrick Bourne, gets put on the pup, so he's going to miss the first 4 games to start the year. They kept 7 anyways. So I just don't know. I don't have any faith in anybody. Demario Douglas has been having a good camp when he's played as the one true slot receiver. Javon Baker, it sounds like he has an uphill battle to even get on the field. He's probably going to be a Sunday morning inactive on most days. They brought in KJ Osborne, Jalen Rager, guys to be vets or depth. Keyshawn Butte, who missed last year due to suspension, made the roster for now.
They all made the roster.
Yeah, I don't know what to say because Tyquan Thornton is going to play a little bit. Polk, everybody loves, but I think you should calm down a little bit on that one.
Right.
But regardless, there's 7 guys, and that doesn't include the guy that's going to be on the pup. That is probably their best veteran receiver.
Right. And well, to me also, it's like Tyquan Thornton and KJ Osborne started, and then Demario Douglas was the slot receiver on 3 receiver sets. It's just a little weird when we want to push up these rookies, and of course they have the upside, but they don't have a very good quarterback. They're not the starters to begin the year. It's a little just scary to want to have those guys as the guys you're going to like try to pick in the 13th round right now, right?
I feel like this team's going to be very Carolina Panther-esque last year, where they just quarterback situation is going to be rough. Secondary is really good,
right?
But you're not going to be throwing a ton on them. You're going to be running.
It's going to be boring.
It's going to be boring. It's going to be a game that you don't want to watch,
right?
From an aesthetic perspective.
Yeah, for sure. And then on the Washington side of the ball, there are a little bit more aesthetics for sure going on there. With the Jahan Dotson trade, it opens up the option of getting another receiver, that guy possibly being Brandon Ayuk. We have been talking about that being a possibility. It just hasn't really come to fruition. And with Jahan Dotson, it didn't really make that much sense. But one thing that I want us to talk about is Martavis Bryant coming in, getting picked up, and then recently getting cut off the rip. Did have a touchdown in the game. But really, this game didn't tell us anything. It's more so looking at the roster cuts that kind of gives away what, might be going on there.
Yeah, and they were having a battle for the last quarterback spot between Trace McSorley and Jeff Driscoll. Looks like Jeff Driscoll won the third quarterback job. Marcus Mariota didn't really play at all. I don't think he played at all this preseason. And then running back wise, they're going to be running, Brian Robinson Jr., Austin Eckler, Jeremy McNichols out the gate. They did keep 4 tight ends for now. Ben Sinnott is the guy that we've talked about and hyped up. I think he's a late late season
One more year.
possible.
Yeah.
But either way, it feels like we are a year away, or it's got to be a patient thing. Patience is a virtue for him. But yeah, it's interesting. They'll be much improved defensively. One from a schematic perspective, but they brought in a lot of guys, and those guys made the roster.
Mm-hmm.
Talking about Bobby Wagner, Cleveland Farrell,
Frankie Louvu.
yeah,
And then on their defensive line, they brought in Johnny Newton. Well. Lots of guys.
And one of your favorite guys in this class, Mike Sanders, still.
Yep, love him as a nickel.
So.
Yep. One thing I will say also about this team, Sam Hartman got cut. I just thought it was really this team is an interesting team, and I want to talk about the tight end position a little longer. Is Zach Ertz is the tight end killer. We talked about this on the ride home. Wherever he goes, he kills young tight ends like dreams of playing the first year. He did it in Arizona to Trey McBride. Now Trey McBride's a top 5 tight end. Everybody's so excited about him. I was excited about him when he came out. But he had
for Dallas Goedert to get going when he was at Philly.
Exactly. So just slow burn on Ben Sinnott, but don't expect him to just fall apart. He was our number 2 tight end, and he went number 2 in the draft class. So we did a dang good job of that. Oh no, he went 3, didn't he?
Yeah.
He was behind Jatavian.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Brock, Jatavian, and then him. But we had him above Jatavian in ours. So let me stop this share because that is our last game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's preseason takeaways, cuts that we know of at the moment. There could have been some when we were talking, and we'll bring up in our video tomorrow because we are live streaming. Is it our last one?
We got one more after that.
The eve of the NFL season, but this will be a big one after preseason and cuts have happened. I didn't expect to be loving the ADPs as much as I am because I expected once the sharps came in and we're just going to be driving off all the guys that we had late round shares on. It's just, there's not much to say. And then it's open. Things aren't going like we thought they would in our favor. And so we're really excited about that. We're going to draft a couple tomorrow. So please come in and watch. It's very exciting.
Yeah, we're hoping that things go. Obviously, things are going our way just based on like who's making teams and things like that. But we then, of course, need certain players to get on the field to make us even more happy. But we appreciate y'all hanging out with us. Go check out our socials. We have our Discord set up. We've been talking lots of things, including Week 1 DFS and Prize Picks and Underdogs. So go see those, and we will talk to y'all next time.